I clicked transfer and sent my pension to my son. 2 weeks, Mom, he said. You'll get it right back. Then, silence. Calls skipped. Texts short. My stomach in knots. One afternoon, a silver convertible rolled up. His girlfriend laughed, sunglasses on, keys in hand. That's when I knew something was wrong. I didn't shout. I paid attention. And one small thing I found later told me the truth I didn't want to see. Before I show you what I found, tap subscribe, tell me where you're watching from, and please share this with one person you love. This can happen to anyone. Now let's get into it. My name is Margaret Ellis. I'm 68 years old, a retired school teacher, and until recently, I believed I had done everything right. I spent 4 decades in front of chalkboards, guiding students through the world of words, numbers, and history. My life was never glamorous, but it was full of purpose. I took pride in showing up every day, rain or shine, for my students. And while I may not have traveled the world or worn expensive clothes, I saved, carefully, faithfully. Every dollar I tucked away was meant to keep me safe in the years to come. My pension became my safety net, my independence, and in many ways, my pride. I live in the same small house my husband George and I bought 40 years ago, a quiet, modest place tucked in a neighborhood that had aged right alongside me. The walls still carry the warmth of our laughter and the occasional echo of our arguments. George passed away 8 years ago. Cancer, quick, cruel. But even in the way he left, he did so with grace, as he did everything. He was my compass, my steady hand. Since he's been gone, I've clung to routine like it was life support. Morning coffee on the porch, watering the garden at noon, a crossword puzzle before dinner, and I always checked my accounts on Sunday mornings. I had a ritual. Sit at the kitchen table with a fresh notepad, pull out my folder labeled retirement in George's handwriting, and balance my books. I knew the exact amount of every deposit, every withdrawal. I didn't trust apps. I trusted paper, ink, and routine. George and I never had much, but what we had, we protected. We weren't the kind to splurge or indulge. When Ethan was little and asked for a new toy or a trip to Disneyland, it hurt to say no. But George would hold my hand and say, "Someday, he'll understand." We did what we could. We loved with meals on the table, with scraped-together school fees and warm jackets bought on clearance. Ethan always had what he needed, even if it wasn't what he wanted. Now Ethan is 34. He lives in the city, comes around less than he should, but when he does, he fills the house with that same boyish energy. He's always been a charmer, the kind of man who could sell sand in a desert, but his charm was like a ribbon around a messy box. Pleasant on the outside, unpredictable on the inside. He tried college, then dropped out, tried starting a business, then quit. There was always a new dream, a new scheme, a new woman. Still, he was my only child, and no matter how many times he disappointed me, I couldn't stop loving him. It was early spring when Ethan showed up unannounced. The daffodils in my front yard had just started to bloom. I remember because I was pruning them when I saw his car pull in. He stepped out, smiling like nothing was wrong. Tall, confident, with that same reckless gleam in his eyes. He was holding a to-go tray with 2 lattes. "Thought I'd surprise you, Ma," he said. I smiled despite myself. I missed him. I always did. We sat in the living room, the same couch he used to somersault over as a child. He complimented the curtains, asked about my garden, made small talk. Then his tone shifted. "Listen, Ma," he began, clearing his throat. "I've run into a bit of a situation." My stomach tensed. I knew that tone. I knew what was coming. He told me his accounts had been frozen due to a clerical error at his bank. Something about identity verification and delayed wire transfers. He made it sound technical and frustrating. He even pulled up emails and bank screenshots on his phone, flipping through them fast enough that I couldn't really read them. "I just need a place to park some money for a bit," he said. "Just a couple weeks. I'll transfer it right back. It's safer in your account anyway. And who better to trust than my own mom?" I laughed nervously. "Well, I suppose that's true." He went on, talking circles around my doubts. assuring me he wasn't asking for money, just a safe harbor. I didn't know much about digital banking, and all his jargon made me feel like a relic. But I nodded. I trusted him, because despite everything, he was my boy. "I just need you to transfer your savings to me temporarily, he said. "I swear you'll have it all back, plus interest." He laughed, trying to make it light. I tried to smile. That night, I sat at my kitchen table longer than usual. I looked at the account. Every cent I'd saved, every school year I'd worked, every skipped vacation, every secondhand coat. And then I looked at my son's name on the transfer form. George would have said no, firmly. But George wasn't here, and I was tired of being alone, tired of second-guessing everything. Maybe this was just one of those tests of faith. Maybe it was a small thing that would bring my son closer. So I clicked the transfer button. I stared at the confirmation screen for a long time, listening to the ticking of the old wall clock. Something about the silence felt heavier than usual. I told myself it was fine, that Ethan would call in a few days, laughing, saying the problem was fixed, that my money would be back in its rightful place. But deep down, something was already unraveling, and I didn't know it yet. But that one click would change everything. 3 days passed after I made the transfer, then a week. Ethan hadn't called. No messages, no check-ins, no updates. I told myself he was busy. Maybe he was sorting it out with the bank. Maybe he didn't want to worry me until everything was resolved. I kept sipping my morning coffee, glancing at the phone like it might ring any second. But silence held firm, like a fog that refused to lift. By the second week, I started to feel it. The unease creeping up my spine like cold fingers. I knew Ethan well, knew how he could talk his way in and out of anything. But this wasn't about talking. This was about money. My money. And silence, I had learned, was often louder than words. I tried calling him. Once, twice, 3 times. The first rang through, the second went straight to voicemail. The third was met with a short text. "Hey, Ma, things are hectic, RN. All good, though. We'll call soon. Love you." All good. Those 2 words felt like a lie I was supposed to swallow whole. And yet I did. Because what else could I do? On the outside, I went about life as usual. The garden got watered, the laundry folded, the mail checked. But inside, I was unraveling. I found myself double-checking my bank account, even though I knew what I'd see. An empty line where the number used to be, a zeroed-out balance that mocked me every time I logged in. Then came the day I ran into Carol, my neighbor from 2 doors down. She asked about Ethan, said she hadn't seen him in a while. I fumbled through a lie, something about work keeping him busy. She nodded politely, but I caught that glint of curiosity in her eyes, that hint of judgment. The feeling that people were starting to talk. It was the 3rd week when Ethan finally showed up again. Another surprise visit. I was in the kitchen, slicing apples for a pie I no longer had the appetite to bake, when his car pulled into the driveway. My heart did a small, hopeful leap, and then immediately plummeted. He walked in like nothing had happened, smiling, arms open. "Hey, Ma, you look great." I couldn't hide the frown. "Ethan, where have you been?" He shrugged, setting down a bag of groceries he'd brought, as if a carton of eggs and a box of crackers could erase weeks of silence. "It's been crazy," he said. "Bank stuff got even messier. Long story short, I had to get a lawyer involved. But don't worry, everything's moving now." I just stared at him. "And you couldn't call?" His smile faltered. "I was going to. I just didn't want to give you half info. Figured I'd wait till I had something solid." I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. We ate dinner in near silence. He talked about Lena, his new girlfriend, said she was into fashion and might start her own boutique. He talked like everything was fine, like we were 2 friends catching up over a meal, not a mother and son navigating an emotional minefield. After he left, I sat alone in the living room, the television playing reruns I wasn't watching. My pie sat untouched on the counter. Something about the way Ethan had smiled through it all felt rehearsed, like he was playing a part, and I was the audience, expected to applaud. The following week, I decided to drive to the city. I hadn't visited Ethan's apartment in over a year, but I remembered the way. I called first, no answer. So I went anyway. His building hadn't changed, though the lobby had new furniture. I asked the receptionist if Ethan Ellis was in. She hesitated, then said, "He moved out 2 months ago." My heart dropped. "Are you sure?" She checked again. "Yes, ma'am. We mailed the deposit back weeks ago." I thanked her, walked back to my car, and sat behind the wheel in stunned silence. My hands trembled on the steering wheel. If he wasn't living there, where was he staying? Why hadn't he told me? That evening, I called Ethan again. This time, I didn't bother with pleasantries. "Why didn't you tell me you moved?" He paused. "It was a quick thing. Lena had a better place. We just figured it made sense." "Then why lie?" He sighed. "I didn't lie. I just didn't mention it." "That's not how trust works, Ethan." There was silence on the line. Then he mumbled, "I'll bring the money back soon. I promise." But promises without timelines are just dressed-up lies. I was starting to see it. The fraying edges of the sun I thought I knew. And what lay beneath was far more careless, far more selfish than I had ever dared to admit. The next few days were filled with sleepless nights. I kept thinking back to the transfer, the numbers, the confirmation screen, the way Ethan had looked me in the eye and said, "Who better to trust than your son?" And each time that phrase replayed like a cruel joke. Who better, indeed? The days that followed were heavy, not just with silence, but with something far darker, the slow, creeping realization that maybe, just maybe, I'd made a terrible mistake. I kept trying to convince myself that things would smooth out, that Ethan had good intentions, that there was still a thread of truth in what he'd said about fixing things. But each day he didn't call. Each hour that passed without a message, that thread frayed a little more. I stopped checking my bank account. What was the point? I already knew the balance. Nothing. The once familiar ritual of opening the folder labeled retirement had become a source of dread. I tucked it away in the bottom drawer, under stacks of old tax returns and warranties for appliances I no longer owned. Out of sight, but not out of mind. The nights were worst. That's when the doubts grew teeth. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, George's side of the bed untouched and cold, wondering if he would have seen this coming. No, not just seen it, prevented it. He would have sniffed out the lies, seen past Ethan's practiced grin, and put a stop to it before a single dollar left our account. But he wasn't here, and the silence in the house felt like punishment. I tried to distract myself with routines. I deep-cleaned the kitchen. I reorganized the pantry. I washed the curtains. I went through photo albums and pulled weeds from the garden until my knees ached. Anything to keep my hands busy while my heart quietly panicked. Then came the mail, a sleek, glossy envelope with no return address. Inside, a marketing brochure for luxury real estate and exotic travel destinations. "Live boldly," it said in gold lettering. A handwritten sticky note was attached. "You'd look great on a beach, Ma. E." My stomach turned. Was this supposed to be a joke? A twisted gift? Or worse, a distraction? I held the card in my hand for what felt like hours. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt small. Like I'd been turned into a background character in my own life. The next morning, I decided to call Lena. I'd never spoken to her directly before. She was always a presence in Ethan's life, appearing in Instagram photos, in stories he told over rushed dinners, in the perfume that lingered on his coat. But I didn't know her, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. Still, I had to try. I found her number saved in one of Ethan's old texts and called. It rang twice. "Hello?" Her voice was sharper than I expected, polished, impatient. "Lena? This is Margaret, Ethan's mother." A pause. "Oh, hi. Everything okay?" "I was wondering if you've seen Ethan. He hasn't been returning my calls. A soft chuckle. Yeah, he's been super busy. We're working on a few things. Business stuff. You know how it is. No, I don't. That's why I'm asking. She hesitated. Look, I'm not sure it's my place. I'm his mother. If he's in trouble or if he's doing something reckless, I need to know. Another pause. Then, carefully, Ethan said you were helping him, that you wanted to support us getting on our feet. Support them? Is that what he'd told her? I gave him my pension, I said, my voice trembling now. My entire pension. I thought it was temporary, but I haven't seen a dime back. Oh. Her tone changed. I didn't realize it was all your money. I thought it was just a loan. It wasn't a gift, and it wasn't his to spend. Silence stretched again. Finally, she said, You should probably talk to him. I can't really say much more. And just like that, the line went dead. I stood there holding the phone like it was a piece of evidence. Because that's what it felt like. Proof of a betrayal I was only beginning to comprehend. Later that day, I took a walk. I needed air and space and movement. I wandered through the neighborhood, eyes barely focused, past the bakery George used to stop at on Saturdays, past the bench where I'd sat with Ethan after his high school graduation, past the old library where I'd once read to children. Everything felt smaller, more distant. When I returned home, something new was waiting for me in the driveway. A silver convertible, shiny, new, showroom clean. And leaning against it, snapping a selfie, was Lena. She wore oversized sunglasses, her lips glossed, her long coat open to reveal a designer blouse. The camera caught her at just the right angle, one heel popped, head tilted. I froze. She didn't notice me right away. Then she turned and smiled like we were old friends. Oh, hey, Margaret. You like it? She asked, patting the car roof. I forced a nod. Is it yours? Well, Ethan surprised me, said he hit big on poker. Lucky streak, huh? Poker. The word echoed in my mind like a gunshot. He'd gambled. He hadn't invested. He hadn't held it. He hadn't saved it. He'd gambled it. And what's worse, he'd lost. I could see it now in the way he disappeared, in the hurried texts, in the borrowed confidence that barely masked fear. I nodded again, my voice barely above a whisper. It's very nice. She smiled wider. Isn't it? Ethan's full of surprises. I watched her for a moment longer, then turned and walked inside. My legs felt like lead, my chest burned. Inside, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the spot where my retirement folder used to rest. There was no denying it anymore. He'd used me. He'd gambled everything. And when it all came crashing down, he hid behind sweet words and shiny distractions. Lena got a car. I got silence. Later that night, I opened the computer and checked his social media. There it was, a new post. Ethan and Lena. Power couple vibes, new wheels, new wins, big year ahead. I stared at the post for a long time, at Ethan's smile, at the comments from friends cheering him on. No one knew the truth. No one knew that his level up had come at the cost of his mother's entire future. I closed the laptop. My hands trembled. My eyes burned. And then I whispered, to no one and everyone, What have you done, Ethan? Not just to me, but to yourself. And still, he hadn't called. Still, he hadn't said sorry. The silence wasn't just a pause anymore. It was a wall. A deliberate, calculated wall he'd built to keep me out while he played house with a woman who didn't even blink at the idea of a car bought with someone else's sacrifice. I went to bed that night but didn't sleep. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, and how fast it could evaporate. Just like that. Like a fog at sunrise. Like a dream turned nightmare. And the worst part? I was still holding out hope. Still waiting for the phone to ring. Still wishing he'd show up on the porch with that crooked smile and a check in his hand saying, Ma, I fixed it. But I knew better, because when someone shows you who they are, not once but over and over, you have to start believing them, even if they're your child. The next morning began with rain, the kind of soft gray drizzle that taps on the windows gently, as if trying not to disturb the silence of a house that hasn't known laughter in weeks. I watched it from my kitchen, the steam of my tea fogging up the glass as I stood there, robe wrapped tight, slippers damp from a leaking pipe I'd been meaning to fix. The irony wasn't lost on me. Small problems I had no money to solve anymore. A pension's worth of cushion, gone. And the son I had once cradled in my arms was somewhere out there, living lavishly with a woman who mistook silence for class. I had barely touched my toast when I heard the rev of an engine outside. That unmistakable sound, smooth, expensive, unnecessarily loud. I stepped closer to the window, peeled back the curtain, and there it was again. That silver convertible. Ethan's car. Or Lena's, rather. The same car that had been in front of my house a few days prior. Only this time, it wasn't parked neatly in the driveway. It was angled dramatically. Front tires turned like it was posing for a photograph. Lena was behind the wheel, her sunglasses on despite the clouds, one arm resting casually on the door. Ethan stood beside her, holding 2 coffee cups, grinning like a teenager who had just gotten away with something. He leaned in, kissed her cheek, and handed her a cup. They didn't see me watching. Maybe they wouldn't have cared if they had. She said something. He laughed. Then he opened the trunk, pulled out a shopping bag, one of those high-end boutique bags with shiny rope handles and gold lettering. It flapped once in the wind like a flag of audacity. I moved away from the window, heart pounding. The house felt too small. I paced the hallway, back and forth like I was trying to wear down the wood beneath my feet. My heart raced. My thoughts spiraled. It was all so obvious now. The truth I hadn't wanted to see. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Ethan hadn't just lost track of time or gotten overwhelmed by some bank error. He had gambled my pension, spent it, burned through it with nothing but Lena's attention and shiny new toys to show for it. And the worst part? He wasn't even hiding it. He was flaunting it, right outside the home where he'd been raised by 2 people who would have given him the world if he'd only asked with honesty. I grabbed my coat. I didn't plan to. My body moved before my mind caught up. I opened the door and stepped outside, bare feet slipping slightly on the damp concrete. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with that heavy, earthy scent of a storm just past. Ethan looked up, startled. "Ma!" Lena turned and offered a polished smile. "Morning, Margaret." I stared at the 2 of them, at the car, at the boutique bag, at the man I used to rock to sleep when his nightmares woke him in the middle of the night. "Nice car," I said, voice flat. Ethan looked at Lana. She smiled. "Isn't it? He surprised me. Said he got lucky playing poker." I kept my eyes on Ethan. He looked down, suddenly interested in the cup in his hand. "Poker," I repeated. "How lucky?" Lena laughed, twirling her hair. "Lucky enough for leather seats and heated steering wheels." I nodded. "Right." The silence that followed was thick. Lena didn't seem to notice, but Ethan did. His smile was slipping bit by bit. "Well," I said, "I hope it was worth it." Lena blinked. "Sorry?" I looked straight at Ethan. "All of it. The money, the lies, this fantasy you've built." Lena's smile faltered. Ethan stepped forward. "Ma, let's not do this out here." I ignored him. "You told me it was temporary, that you needed somewhere to hold the money, that it would be back in a week." "Margaret," I turned to Lena. "Did he tell you where the money came from?" She hesitated. "He said you were helping us get started." My mouth twitched. "Helping you start what exactly? A runway show, a casino empire?" Ethan set the coffee cups on the car roof. "Let's go inside." "No," I said. "You can go. But the next time you pull into my driveway in that thing, do it knowing exactly what it cost. Not just in dollars, but in trust, in dignity, in the kind of peace that takes a woman 40 years to build." Ethan's jaw clenched. "You're overreacting." I shook my head. No, I think I'm reacting just enough. Lena looked between us, suddenly uncomfortable. Maybe we should— You should, I interrupted. You should go. Both of you. They left, not in a rush, but without their earlier swagger. Ethan didn't look back. I stood in the driveway until their car disappeared down the street. Then I went inside and locked the door, not out of fear, but finality. I made myself a fresh cup of tea, hands still shaking. I sat at the table, stared at the empty space where my retirement folder used to sit, and finally allowed myself to cry. Not for the money, not even for the betrayal, but for the version of my son I had held onto for too long. The Ethan who would have never let this happen. The Ethan who no longer existed. And in that moment, something shifted. A subtle, a quiet resolve. This wouldn't end with me crying in a kitchen, because I had nothing left to lose, which meant I finally had the courage to act. I didn't hear from Ethan for days after that last conversation. No calls, no texts, nothing. Just a void where a son should be. I went about my days in a haze, folding laundry I didn't need to fold, watering plants that had already been soaked by rain, opening cupboards just to close them again. I wasn't searching for anything in particular, maybe just the sense that life was still following some kind of rhythm, even if mine had lost its beat. On the 5th night, the doorbell rang. I hadn't been expecting anyone. It was nearly 9 p.m. The house was dark except for the lamp near George's photo, that old picture of him in his flannel shirt and crow's feet from too much sun. He was smiling in that photo, hand on Ethan's small shoulder. Ethan couldn't have been more than 10. I looked at it for a moment before I stood up. At the door, Ethan stood with his hands buried deep in the pockets of his hoodie. His hair was messy, his eyes red-rimmed, as if he hadn't slept in days. "Can I come in?" he asked. I opened the door wider and stepped aside. He didn't say anything right away, just walked into the living room and dropped onto the couch, slumping forward, elbows on his knees. I followed slowly, not sitting yet. I wanted to see if he would speak first. "I messed up," he finally said, voice barely above a whisper. I said nothing. He looked up at me. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I thought I could fix it." I raised an eyebrow. "Fix what, Ethan?" He swallowed. "The money. I thought I could double it, mate. Triple it. I found this site, this poker room, and I got lucky at first. Really lucky. I thought I could bring it back to you with more, like, 'Here you go, Mom, early Christmas. I didn't mean to lose it.'" "You didn't mean to?" I asked. He shifted in his seat. "No, I swear, I kept thinking the next game, the next hand, that'd be the one. But I lost a big chunk early on, and then I panicked. I kept playing, trying to win it back." I finally sat down. "And the car?" He winced. "That was what I had left. I'd lost almost everything else, but I still had some of the cash. Lena was going through a rough patch, and I thought maybe if I gave her something nice, she'd— I don't know. Stay. Believe in me. She didn't know it was my money, did she?" He hesitated. "I didn't tell her. I let her believe I hit big." I nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of it all. "So let me make sure I understand this. You asked me to trust you, said you needed a place to hold the money. Then you took it, gambled it, lost most of it, and used the rest to buy your girlfriend a car, while telling her you were just lucky." He said nothing. "Do you have any idea what that money was to me?" I asked. "I do now," he whispered. "No," I said sharply. "You don't. That money was 40 years of standing in front of classrooms, correcting spelling tests, buying my own supplies when the school ran out. It was decades of packing lunches instead of eating out, sewing old coats instead of buying new ones. That was my peace, Ethan, my security. It was the one thing I had left that made me feel like I'd done something right. And you burned it, on a gamble." Tears welled in his eyes, but I wasn't ready for them. "I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. I'm not sure that's enough anymore." He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a crumpled envelope. "It's not much. I managed to sell some things. My computer, some gear. It's $2,000. I'll get more, I promise. I'll make it right. I didn't take the envelope. You can't make it right, I said. Not with money. You gambled something bigger than dollars, Ethan. You gambled my trust, my love. He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. I let myself believe you were just lost, that you needed a little help. But this wasn't just a mistake. This was a choice. Over and over again, you chose the lie. You chose the easy way, and you did it knowing what was at stake. He looked down. I know, and I hate myself for it. Do you? I asked. Because I don't think you do. Not yet. He looked up, and for the first time, I saw something different. Not arrogance, not denial, but shame. Real, bleeding deep shame. I want to fix it, he said again, softer. Then start by being honest, I said. Not with me, with yourself, about who you are, what you've done. He nodded slowly. Okay. I stood. I think you should go now. He blinked. Are you serious? I am. He stood too, awkwardly. Will you at least keep the envelope? I paused, then took it. Not out of forgiveness, but because I might need it, not for me, but to rebuild what little was left. I don't know if I can ever trust you again, I said, but I hope you figure out how to become the man I raised you to be. He nodded once, jaw tight, and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the knob. Tell Dad I'm sorry, he said, without looking back. I waited until I heard the car pull away before I finally sat down again. My fingers gripped the envelope tightly, but my heart felt looser than it had in days. The truth was out. The damage was done. But now, finally, I could begin to face it. Not as a victim, but as a woman who had been betrayed, and who would not let that betrayal define her. I wasn't sure what came next, but I knew one thing. I would not let Ethan's choices be the last word in my story. 2 days after Ethan left, I pulled the envelope out of the kitchen drawer where I'd stuffed it, unopened, since the night he gave it to me. I laid it on the table next to my teacup and stared at it like it might spontaneously turn into something more. $2,000. A pitiful fraction of what had been lost. The gesture was there, yes. But gestures didn't pay for security systems, medical emergencies, or groceries 10 years from now. They didn't undo damage. They didn't restore trust. I opened the envelope anyway. Old habit. Hope, perhaps. Inside, crumpled bills and a money order, $2,000 flat, neatly stacked but carelessly folded, as if even the money itself felt ashamed. Later that evening, I sat with George's photo again. I do that when I don't know what to do next. I talked to him. Out loud. Not in prayer exactly, but in that way you talk to someone who was once your mirror. He'd always been the one who handled our big decisions. Not because I wasn't capable, but because he was calm where I was emotional, measured where I rushed. George, I said, if you were here, you'd have spotted it from the first sentence out of his mouth. I ran my finger along the frame but you're not. And now I've gone and done the one thing you asked me not to. I trusted him with what we saved. The next morning, I called Alan Peters. Alan had been George's best friend since their Army days. He was older than us by 5 years and now fully retired. Still sharp, still precise. He'd been a financial advisor for decades, and though he'd closed his office a few years ago, I knew he still did pro bono help for friends and local charities. If anyone could help me understand what was left, if anything, it was Alan. He answered on the second ring. Margaret, everything all right? I didn't lie. No, Alan, not really. Can you come by this week? He was there the next afternoon. Same crisp shirt, same neatly parted hair. He didn't smile when he walked in, just gave me a brief nod and said, whatever it is, we'll sort it. I had printed out the bank statements and set them out like a crime scene on the table. I watched his face as he went over them. Page after page of transactions I couldn't bear to look at anymore. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed, his lips pressed into a line. Online poker, he said finally. Crypto transfers, high-risk e-wallets. He burned through it fast. He flipped a page. And look at this. Retail stores, electronics, a dealership. He was bleeding it from both ends. How much is left? I asked. He looked up at me with something close to pity. Almost nothing. There's a single account with a few $100s. The rest is drained. I sat back, heart thudding. I thought maybe it could be reversed, I whispered. Maybe there'd be a way to freeze it, reclaim it. Alan nodded slowly. If he misrepresented the purpose, if you can prove it was not a gift and that it was obtained under false pretenses, there might be a case. But it'll be tough. Ethan's your son. Courts don't usually get involved unless there's a paper trail, something clear. There are texts, I said, messages where he promised it was temporary, that it was just for safekeeping. That helps, he said. And if we act fast, we might be able to freeze what little's left before it vanishes, too. We sat in silence for a minute. Then Alan asked, "Do you want to press charges?" The question stung. Not because it was unfair, but because it was fair. More than fair. I didn't answer right away. My eyes drifted to the living room, to the couch where Ethan had once built pillow forts, to the stairs he used to slide down with a blanket tied around his neck like a cape. My mind split in two, one half grieving, the other raging. I don't know, I said finally, but I want to know exactly what he did. Every penny, every step. Alan nodded. Then we'll start with a full audit. Over the next week, Alan came by almost daily. He brought his laptop and a box of manila folders, and together we reconstructed the crime. Because that's what it was, a quiet, unspoken crime committed under the illusion of trust. He taught me how to pull records, how to read the metadata from bank exports, how to flag red flag vendors and track patterns. It was overwhelming at first, a flood of numbers, dates, codes, and institutions. But then, slowly, it became a story. A horrible, twisted narrative written in dollar signs. We traced over $89,000 in transfers. The biggest withdrawals happened within 3 days of me making the deposit. Large amounts moved from my account into his. Then those same amounts were split, part to online gambling platforms, part to a cryptocurrency exchange, and then into several prepaid digital cards. It's like he planned this, Alan said, more to himself than to me. He didn't just make a mistake, he structured it to avoid detection. My stomach turned. I learned what KYC meant, know your customer, and how platforms exploit loopholes to delay verifications. I learned that poker sites don't report to financial institutions unless flagged. I learned about cash-out strategies that criminals use. Criminals. That word felt like acid in my mouth. Ethan wasn't a criminal. He was my son, my baby. But when I looked at the evidence, what else could I call it? The worst part wasn't even the amounts. It was the timing. On the same day I'd told him about a leak in the basement I couldn't afford to fix, he had spent $600 at a luxury sneaker store. On the same day I'd texted asking if he was okay, he had wired $3,000 to an online casino in Singapore. While I was sitting in this very kitchen crying, he was placing bets in $20 increments, trying to turn one mother's sacrifice into a jackpot. Alan was quiet most days, but one evening he looked up from his laptop and said, "Margaret, I've worked with people who've been defrauded by strangers, scammers, hackers, but this is worse." "Because it's blood," I said, "not business." He nodded. We gathered everything. The statements, the transfers, the communications. We cataloged them into folders. We printed screenshots, labeled files, and prepared a submission to the bank's fraud division. Alan even reached out to a friend, an attorney retired from elder abuse cases, who agreed to look over the documents. And still, through all of it, Ethan remained silent. No calls, no texts, not even after the email confirmation came in that his accounts had been frozen pending investigation. Not even after Lena's Instagram went private. Not even after the silver convertible disappeared from his driveway. He had vanished. And that, somehow, hurt most of all. Because I was still his mother, and part of me had wanted to believe he would come home with an apology. a confession, a promise to change. But people who vanish rarely return on their own. They come back when they're cornered. And with Alan's help, I was finally building that corner. Not out of revenge, out of survival. I had spent my whole life believing in the good of people, teaching children that mistakes can be learned from, that honesty is noble, that love means forgiveness. But even the best students need consequences, and sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones you never wanted to teach. The world didn't stop spinning just because mine had. The birds still sang in the morning, the mail still arrived at noon, and the neighborhood kids still rode their bikes up and down the sidewalk like nothing had changed. But inside my house, inside my chest, everything felt suspended, as if time was waiting for me to catch up to the truth I had finally faced. Alan continued helping me file paperwork and organize documents, but we were in a lull now. The initial fire had been lit, bank notices sent, accounts flagged, legal consultations underway, and now came the waiting. The space between impact and consequence. In that space, I started doing something I hadn't let myself do before. I started watching Ethan's life. It began with a curiosity I couldn't resist. I opened up his social media pages, something I'd always avoided, partly out of respect, partly out of fear of what I'd find. But now I needed to know, not just what he'd done, but who he'd become. What I saw made my stomach turn. Photos of rooftop brunches, captioned with things like, "Earned not given." Videos of Lena twirling in new outfits, tagging luxury brands and smiling wide. Selfies in the convertible, his arm draped casually over the steering wheel, sunglasses hiding any trace of guilt. One post stopped me cold, a boomerang of Ethan tossing a stack of bills on a glass table, and the caption, "Chase your dreams or stay broke." My fingers trembled, not just from anger, but from shame. That money, that stack he was flaunting, could have been what I'd saved for a new water heater, or the dental work I'd been putting off, or just peace of mind in a world where everything seems to get more expensive and more uncertain with every passing year. And there he was, tossing it around like confetti. But the most surreal part was the comments. Friends praising his hustle, people asking for tips. One woman called Lena an inspiration. I wanted to reply, to tell them the truth, to say, this isn't success, it's theft with good lighting. But I didn't. Instead, I watched. I gathered. Screenshots, dates, captions, timestamps. I built a different kind of scrapbook, one that cataloged delusion. I wasn't sure if it would ever be useful legally, but for me, it was a map. A guide through the twisted path Ethan had walked while I was left behind. One afternoon, I clicked on a video that had just gone live. Lena was giving a closet tour. Designer shoes lined up in neat rows, purses perched on floating shelves. "Ethan surprised me with this," she said, holding up a limited edition clutch. And this, and this. Every this was a reminder of what I'd lost. I closed the laptop slowly, carefully, like handling something radioactive. That evening, Alan dropped by with updates, but before he could say anything, I pushed a folder across the table. "What's this?" he asked. "Documentation," I said. "Their illusion." He raised an eyebrow, opened it, and whistled low. "Wow." "I don't know if it's useful," I added, "but I need you to see it. I need someone else to know this isn't just about numbers. It's about narrative, about how easily people can be fooled when the lie is shiny enough." Alan flipped through the pages. "You're right, this helps. Courts care about patterns, about behavior, about intent, and this screams intent." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of it settling over us. Finally, Alan asked, "How are you holding up?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I wasn't sure. I felt like I was floating above it all, watching my life unravel from a distance. But there was something new underneath the sorrow, a growing clarity, like the fog was beginning to lift, and underneath was not just loss, but direction. "I'm angry," I said, "but I'm also Awake. Does that make sense? Alan nodded. Perfect sense. The next morning, I went for a walk, my first in weeks. I passed the bookstore, the pharmacy, the little cafe George and I used to sit outside of in the fall. Familiar places that now felt distant, not because they'd changed, but because I had. I walked until my legs ached, until my thoughts stopped racing, until I felt like I could finally breathe again. When I got home, there was a package on my porch. No return address. Inside, a silk scarf in a boutique box, no note. I recognized the logo from Lena's video. I stared at it for a long time. Then, without a word, I walked it to the trash and dropped it in. I wasn't playing that game. Later that week, I got a call from the fraud division. They'd frozen all accessible accounts linked to Ethan. There was an ongoing investigation into possible misrepresentation and financial abuse. It wasn't justice. Not yet, but it was something. Alan came by again to help draft a formal complaint. He told me we had a case, not just morally, but legally. He took advantage of your trust, he said. That matters. He took advantage of my love, I corrected. We both knew that was harder to prove. Still, we moved forward, because the truth didn't need to be proven to hurt. It just needed to be seen. Ethan's silence continued, but now I understood it. He wasn't quiet because he felt bad. He was quiet because he still thought he could outrun the consequences. But illusions, no matter how well lit, always crack in the end. And I was no longer standing in the dark. I had never been inside a lawyer's office before. Not like this. Not for myself. George and I had signed our wills at the local notary's office years ago. Simple documents with modest intentions. Leave the house to Ethan, split the savings between charity and family, no fuss. We never expected betrayal to be part of the end-of-life planning process. But now, here I was, sitting across from a woman named Karen Ingram, a retired prosecutor who handled cases of elder financial abuse. She had kind eyes but didn't waste time. Alan had introduced us. She agreed to help after reviewing the folders and files we'd organized. Bank records, screenshots, messages, timelines. It wasn't just a son borrowing money anymore. It was exploitation. And legally, it might qualify as fraud. "Tell me, Margaret," she said gently. "Are you prepared for what this means?" I looked her straight in the eye. I wasn't, but I am now. Filing the report wasn't dramatic. There was no gavel bang, no signature in blood. It was paperwork, statements, a declaration of events. I signed each page with steady hands, but something trembled inside me, like a tightrope walker taking her first step. Karen warned me of the possible outcomes. Ethan could face investigation. If evidence supported our claim, his assets could remain frozen. In extreme cases, restitution might be ordered. But the process would take time, months, maybe more, and it would likely expose private family matters in public settings. "I don't care who knows," I said. "The shame isn't mine." And I meant it. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone reclaiming her voice. The weight I'd carried, the guilt, the confusion, the humiliation had shifted. It hadn't vanished, but it was no longer suffocating. It had shape now. Direction. Karen made a few calls while I sat across from her. She spoke to the State Financial Abuse Bureau, then the Elder Rights Office, then the bank's legal liaison. Each conversation was clinical, full of phrases I didn't fully grasp. Financial coercion, asset misappropriation, undue influence. But every call ended with the same thing. Someone on the other end agreeing that what had happened to me wasn't just unfortunate. It was unlawful. We filed the claim that same day. When I stepped outside the office, the wind felt different, crisper, like autumn was arriving early, brushing away the last remains of summer's delusion. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. I went about life in small steps. I cooked again, cleaned with music on in the background. I answered calls from friends I'd ignored. I even went to church. slipping into a back pew just as the organ started playing. No one asked where I'd been. They just welcomed me back. But even peace had its edges. At night, my dreams still stung. Sometimes Ethan was little again, asking me to read him bedtime stories. Other times, he was a stranger, slamming the door as he left with my future tucked under his arm. One morning, Alan knocked on my door holding a newspaper. "You might want to sit," he said. I didn't. I took the paper and scanned the front page. Nothing. He flipped to the business section. There, in the lower half, was a headline, "Emerging Fraud Patterns in Family Lending. New Investigations Spark Controversy." Below it, a paragraph outlined 3 ongoing state investigations. Anonymous victims, but the details were familiar. One involved a pension transfer to a relative for temporary use, which was rerouted into gambling and crypto. "Yours?" I asked. "They kept it vague," Alan said. "But yes, Karen confirmed it's based on your case." I nodded. Let them talk. If it helps others, let them read every word. Later that week, Karen emailed me a case number. My claim was officially under review. A specialist had been assigned. Ethan would be notified soon. I imagined his face as he read the letter. The disbelief, the panic. Part of me ached at the thought, but part of me, if I'm honest, felt something close to justice. The storm came the next evening, not outside, inside. I was making dinner when there was a bang on the door, not a knock, a bang. I opened it slowly. Ethan stood there, soaked from rain, his eyes wild. "What did you do?" he shouted. I stepped aside and let him in. "Close the door, you're dripping." He didn't. "You filed a report? You froze my accounts?" "Yes." "Jesus, Mom, do you know what you've done?" "I do." He paced the room like a caged animal. "They're going to investigate me. They're going to ruin me." "No," I said. "You did that yourself." He stopped pacing. "I'm your son." "And I was your mother," I replied, "not your ATM." He flinched. I walked to the table and picked up the folders we'd prepared. "These are copies," I said. "Everything we submitted, every receipt, every transfer, every text." He stared at them, then at me. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with it," he said. "I didn't think you'd steal from me," I replied. He sat heavily in the armchair, the same one George used to sit in. "You could have just talked to me." "I did, for weeks." "And you ignored me. You lied. You let her prance around in stolen shoes while I sat here wondering if I could afford next month's bills." He didn't respond. So I said one final thing. "You didn't just gamble money, Ethan. You gambled me. My trust, my name, my life." He left that night without another word. I watched from the window as he disappeared into the dark, and I didn't cry, because I'd already done that. Now I was busy healing. And healing, I had learned, begins when you stop excusing the people who hurt you. A week passed, then another. Ethan didn't call, he didn't message, he didn't show up at my door again. In many ways, that silence was more revealing than any confrontation could ever be. Because when a man's character is tested, he either steps forward or vanishes. Ethan had chosen to disappear. Karen kept me updated. The investigation was progressing. The evidence we'd collected had been deemed sufficient to proceed with formal review. His accounts remained frozen. There was now an official log under his name in the state database. And just like that, the son I once prayed for, cried over, raised and protected, became a case number. Alan and I sat on my porch one afternoon, both of us sipping lukewarm tea. "He's not going to bounce back easily from this," Alan said quietly. "I know," I replied, "but neither did I." It was true. I had aged in these past few months, not in wrinkles or white hair, those had already come with the years, but in spirit. There was a weariness in my bones I hadn't felt even during George's illness. Grief was a thief, but betrayal, that was a butcher. The neighbors had begun to whisper. I could see it in the way some of them paused just a little too long when walking past. A few had the nerve to ask if I needed anything. Groceries, errands. I thanked them, politely declined. There's a kind of shame that doesn't belong to you, but finds its way to your doorstep anyway. I wore it like a second skin, even as I told myself I shouldn't. I stopped checking Ethan's social media, not because I no longer cared, but because it didn't matter anymore. Lena had gone quiet too. Her page, once filled with brand tags and vacation reels, had turned private. The convertible hadn't been seen in weeks. Word was it had been repossessed. Ethan had tried to sell it but couldn't keep up with the payments. It didn't matter that it was bought with my stolen money. In the bank's eyes, he was the owner. And now, he wasn't. I got a call one morning from a woman who identified herself as Lena's sister. "I hope this isn't inappropriate," she said, "but I just thought you should know. She's gone back to her hometown. She left Ethan, said she couldn't deal with the mess." I didn't respond. "She didn't know," the woman added. "At least not the whole truth. She's not innocent, but, well, she thought he had a business, that he was helping you, not robbing you." After I hung up, I felt nothing. I had no anger left for Lena, no space for her part in the story. She was just a chapter, a footnote, a detail in the bigger betrayal. Karen called that evening. "There's a preliminary hearing scheduled," she said. "It's just a formality, but if you'd like to make a statement, you can. It'll be reviewed as part of the process." I didn't hesitate. "I'd like that." I spent the next 2 days writing it out by hand, not because I had to, but because it grounded me. It reminded me of who I was, a woman who used to stand in front of classrooms, correcting grammar and teaching truth. I wrote every word slowly, carefully. "My name is Margaret Ellis. I am a mother, a widow, and a retired school teacher. I worked 40 years to build a life I could live with dignity. That dignity was taken from me by someone I trusted most, my son. He took my pension, my entire life savings, under the guise of temporary help. He said it was to solve a banking error. What he did instead was gamble it away, spend it on luxury items, and lie to my face. The damage done is not just financial. It is emotional, psychological, and spiritual. I am no longer the same person, but I refuse to be silent. I refuse to let this story end in shame. This is not revenge. This is accountability." When I emailed it to Karen, she called me 10 minutes later. "It's perfect," she said. "Raw. Powerful." The morning of the hearing, I dressed in the same navy blazer George always liked. I stood in front of the mirror and saw not just an old woman, but someone rebuilt. Someone scarred, yes, but not broken. Karen met me outside the courthouse. "You don't have to go in," she said. "They'll review your statement either way." "I know," I replied, "but I'm here now." The room wasn't dramatic. No wooden benches or swinging doors, just a conference space with sterile lighting and a circle of tired-looking professionals. Ethan wasn't there. He'd submitted a remote statement, claimed financial hardship, mental health issues, promised restitution. Promises. He'd always been good at those. I didn't speak. I let my statement do the talking. Afterward, Karen and I walked out into the parking lot. It was gray, breezy, the kind of day that could go either way, storm or sun. "Whatever comes next," she said, "you've done more than most ever do." "I didn't do it for most," I said. "I did it for me." At home, I found a letter in the mailbox. It was from Ethan. I opened it slowly, expecting excuses, begging, manipulation. But instead, it was short. "Ma, I know I've lost your trust. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm trying. I got a job, a real one, warehouse work, nothing fancy, but it's honest. I'm going to start sending you what I can every month. It won't be much, but it'll be real. I know it won't fix what I broke, but it's something." E. I folded the letter and set it beside George's photo. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just exhaled. And for the first time in a long time, the breath didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. The storm was behind me. And what came next, whatever it was, would be mine to shape. There's a different kind of quiet that follows devastation. It's not the tense silence that comes after betrayal or the hollow stillness of heartbreak. It's a deeper, calmer quiet, the kind that settles in once you've already cried the last of your tears, screamed into the void, and realized the world is still turning. That kind of quiet is what my house held now. No more pacing, no more late-night checking accounts, no more flinching when the phone rang. Instead, the silence was mine again, a companion, not a tormentor. I woke up one morning and opened the windows. Let the breeze in, dusted off the curtains. I even changed the cushion covers. Small things, maybe, but for me, they were signs of movement, of life beginning again. My pension was gone. That hadn't changed. The bank was still reviewing the fraud claim. Karen said there was a small chance of partial recovery, maybe through insurance or restitution payments if Ethan followed through. But I had stopped waiting on miracles. Instead, I began to adjust. I looked at the numbers. I downsized a few things, canceled the streaming services I never used, sold off the second car that hadn't been driven in months, and let go of the old upright piano in the guest room. It hurt a little, but it also felt good, clean, like I was trimming back overgrowth after a storm to make way for sunlight. And then came something unexpected. A neighbor, Sheila, stopped by one morning with banana bread and a flyer. "Margaret, I know this might be odd," she said, "but the community center is looking for retired teachers to help with after-school tutoring. It's paid, not much, but it's something." I didn't hesitate. The next week, I found myself sitting at a folding table in a brightly lit room with 5 third graders and a stack of math worksheets. Their laughter was chaotic, their pencils were noisy, their questions came faster than I could answer. But for the first time in months, I felt something shift in my chest. Joy. I didn't need to rebuild the exact life I'd had before. I just needed to build something that still felt like mine. Ethan did send money, eventually. A check arrived a month after his letter, $75. It wasn't the amount that mattered. It was the envelope. The name. The proof that he was, in some small way, trying. I didn't write back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I cashed the check. Because even a small drop can ripple. One evening, I walked into the garage. George's old toolbox was still there, rusted but reliable. I found a framed photo wedged in a dusty shelf. It was from Ethan's high school graduation. George had his hand on Ethan's shoulder. Both were grinning. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I hung it back up. Not because I'd forgotten, but because not all history needs to be erased. Some of it just needs to be reframed. Alan still visits once a week. We sit in the garden, watching the lilacs sway, sipping tea. He never pries, never judges, just listens. "You did the hard thing," he told me one day. "You drew the line." "It almost broke me," I admitted. "But it didn't," he replied. "And that's what matters." The community center offered me a part-time coordinator role. I accepted. My days now have structure. My nights have rest. The ache is still there sometimes, but it's duller now. Not sharp, not bleeding. I even started writing again. Nothing fancy, just small stories, memoir style. Not for publishing, just for me. For healing. For remembering who I am beyond what I lost. Because that's the thing about loss. It tries to redefine you. But only you get to decide what you become after. And I decided not to be a victim. Not forever. One morning, while watering the garden, a little girl from next door peeked over the fence. "Miss Margaret, are you the one who teaches reading now?" I smiled. "Yes, I am," she grinned. "I want to learn to read big words like beautiful and extraordinary." I laughed. "Well, lucky for you, those are my favorite kinds." She waved and ran off. I watched her go, then turned back to the flowers. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt steady. Not healed entirely, but strong, grounded, free. Whatever Ethan's path was now, it wasn't mine to carry. He'd have to earn his own forgiveness, his own peace. And maybe, one day, we'd meet again at a place where the past didn't feel so raw. But for now, I had a life to live. One I built myself, one I wasn't ashamed of, One that finally felt like mine again. Outrow. Have you ever put your full trust in someone you love, only to watch it get shattered? What would you have done if you were in Margaret's shoes? Let me know in the comments below. I read each one. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. If this video moved you, give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to tap the bell icon so you never miss a new upload. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe it'll open their eyes like it did Margaret's. Our other stories should be popping up on screen right about now, so check those out next. And I'll see you tomorrow, same time, with a brand new story.